right, folks, today is our lucky day. We have someone here who I worked with in the publishing business, great salesperson, phenomenal entrepreneur, Samì Haiman Marrero, and she is the CEO and president of Urbander. Tell us about Urbander and introduce yourself, Sammy, because I know who you are, but my students don't.
Thank you, Roger. I'm so excited and delighted to be here with you and honored that you've invited me to be part of this session. Urbander was launched in 2008 in the middle of the last recession. As you know, I had already been in the publishing world, and that's how we met, right? For about, I want to say 11 to 12 years. And at that point, I was working with the New York Post from home in Orlando because I had moved down here, escaping the cold weather and the high, property costs. And but I lost my job in 2008, and at that point, I was like, "Oh my God, now what do I do?" So I started looking for work here locally, but I hadn't set any roots here. And so I decided to take the plunge. I put the blade between my teeth and I launched Urbander. And what do you do, right? You say, okay, I have 12 years experience in marketing, advertising, and in sales. So let me just, do this. And so we focus on multicultural marketing, communication, and diversity and inclusion strategies for businesses, large and small.
Tell the folks out there what that really means and how it applies to the marketing strategies or the marketing objectives of your clients.
Yes. So any company, whether you're in the public sector, so like government, if you're in a nonprofit sector, or if you are a private industry, corporation, like the big companies, okay? You have 4 primary audiences or key stakeholders that you need to communicate with, and you need to do it well. Why? Well, one of your audiences is your internal audiences, which is your employees. It's very important to market to your employees because it costs more to acquire a new employee than it is to retain one because of the interviewing process, looking for the right candidates. And then if you have lost an employee, then you're not producing in that specific area. And so it's important to communicate with them and engage with them so they feel empowered, that they have a voice, they feel like they belong, okay, and that they feel vested in the company and what you're doing. And so that's an internal audience. Then we're talking about the external audiences that all companies have, and it's primarily 3. Number 1, your customers, because that's how you, make the moolah, make money, okay? But then other ancillary targets, which are your vendors. The vendors in the community that support your business, because you can't be everything to everybody. So other vendors that support your business model, okay, are an audience that you also need to cater to and market to and treat with kid gloves because they become your ambassadors in the community. Normally, if they're diverse vendors too, they then tend to be those leaders that can influence diverse communities right in your backyard. And so as a business owner or an organization, it's very important to know how to engage with business community, right? And then last but not least, the grassroots community, the community at large, people that are marginalized, people that perhaps yet don't have the disposable income to tap into your services or to your products, the stuff, right, that you're trying to sell, right, and to make, your business grow. But eventually they do. So you want to make sure that you are a good citizen, a good corporate citizen, and embed in your business model social impact.
What's amazing about you is that your company has grown a lot in the last few years. I mean, you started during a recession, and now today we're in a recession. Tell us about that cycle.
Yeah. Back in 2008, right, it was very scary because it was like all of a sudden it was like I went from making well over a 6-figure income to nada, zippo. And that's a very scary proposition. And so at that point, you know, you just do the math and you're like, okay, so I need to make this amount to at least not lose the house, right? At that point,
Right.
it's like survival mode, right? But then once we were able to, and so advice, relationships are key. Relationships are critical, you know, for your profession and for business. Whether you're working for somebody, never jeopardize your relationships, okay? Because when you're in a pickle, that's what you can totally lean in on. And that's what I did. I spent a whole week making calls, old school, making calls until we landed 3 accounts. It took about a month and a half, but we landed 3 accounts outside of the Orlando market. And that's when I said, okay, now I need to go out and look for business, but close to home, because the gas prices were like $5 a gallon or something like that. So I'm like, I can't drive too far, right? Because we're still broke. But I went into a local chamber, to the closest chamber in my neighborhood. And when I went to the lunch and learn for new members, right? I'm sitting there, I'm listening in, and all of a sudden during the lunch break, the president of the chamber announces, hey, I want to make sure that all new members to the chamber have a chance to stand up and give their elevator speech. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, elevator speech. Okay, whatever. So I'm like, I stay quiet and I observed first. Listening and observing is a wonderful tool. And so I sat there and I watched how people one by one would stand up and say their name, the name of their company, and what they did. And I'm like, okay, cool, I could do that. So I stood up and I said, hi, I'm Samì Haiman Marrero. I'm the CEO of Urbander, and I specialize in the Hispanic market, communications and marketing. And that was it. And I sat down. 10 minutes later, this woman who happened to be the marketing director of the local hospital, like literally 10 minutes from my house, tells me, scoot over. I was sitting in a booth at this restaurant, and she's like, we need to talk. It turns out that we did a community assessment, and 40% of the patients that are coming in through the emergency department are Hispanic, and I have no idea what to do with that. And so I was like, for the great God's grace, right? I was like, I couldn't believe it. So she's like, can you help me? And I said, absolutely. And I had no idea what in the world she needed, what I was doing, but I said absolutely, because homegirl needed some business, you know? So I was like, I have a baby to feed. And so I went in and again observed and listened. And so I finally met with her, and I was able to listen, take notes, and determine how I could help her based on all of those transferable skills that I had acquired throughout my marketing, advertising, and publishing and sales experience, right? To help her and provide solutions for the issues that she was having, which had to do with communication, engagement, okay, and basically selling the hospital as a friendly place for Hispanic audiences and patients.
Sami, that's such a great story. It just shows that no matter what's happening in the world, right, you just have to keep plugging away, and you have to keep trying, and you have to find a way to keep going forward. And that's what makes this such an interesting story. I want to kind of sidestep for 1 second. Tell us about the name Urbander and how that come about.
Okay, you're gonna laugh. So I then after that I became part of the Hispanic Chamber, and they had this special group. It's called the Leads Group, to get leads for business, right? And it wasn't that good. But anyway, but I met a lot of good people there who are still friends. We're like family now. And as I was there, my company, the original name was Urbano Insights, because I just wanted to do consulting and stuff, which is important because you have to be open to rebrand, to reconsider your brand and do a brand refresh. And so it's very important to not get so hung up on your name or the logo of your business. But in this case, it served me as an experience to be able to share with potential customers or clients that I have, companies, organizations that have a logo or branding that really doesn't work, to tell them, hey, I went through that too. In year 2 of my business, I had to do a makeover, and it's okay. It's a little tummy tuck here, a little facelift there, but it works. And so what happened was, I saw another business that had really cool logo and a really cool name on their business card. And I told them, who designed your stuff? Because my husband's a designer too, but you become very self-aware and critical of the stuff you produce. So I was curious, and they told me, oh, this guy, Dario Camacho, he's awesome. So I set up a meeting with Dario, because I don't know it all, right? So I set up a meeting with Dario, and Dario convinced me to change the name of my company from Urbano Insights to Urbander. And what does Urbander mean? Nothing. It means nothing. And this was his rationale. I'll tell you the rationale behind it. So he tells me, why do you not want to change your name from Urbano Insights? And I said, well, because Insights is like consulting, and I don't want to do anything other than consulting, right? And multicultural marketing. And he says, okay, so let's say this. Let's say you get a client that you're doing multicultural marketing for. And all of a sudden they say, hey, Sami, I'm happy with your work. We have this major event. Could you help us put together this event? You're saying you don't want to do event management, but let's say they say, I have $500,000. Could you put together this event? What would you do? And I'm like, I would rip their arm off and I would do the job, right? I would take the job. He says, so there you go. You need a name that's short, that nobody has it, that the domain name is easy to find, that is that you can copyright, that is very unique, and that means nothing. So you can tag under it creative services, event management, language services.
Wow.
And that's what we've done. And so that's why every time we get a new opportunity that expands our bandwidth, and they're like, oh, we became diversity and inclusion experts. So that's it. It's Urbander, diversity and inclusion, diversity, multicultural marketing, diversity, and that we could do anything,
That's great. That's really a great lesson right there, and one that we never get to talk about.
Yeah. It's being nimble. You have to be nimble. You have to follow trends. You have to be able to adapt to the needs and to be ready to provide solutions and be creative, and that would that's going to lead you to, pathways to success that you never in your wildest dreams would have imagined you could have.
That's such a great story. Now, speaking of stories, we had this conversation before we did this interview, because I'm a real fan of telling stories. Stories sell. Stories connect people. Stories bring communities together. And you happen to be, as demonstrated here, a great storyteller and an advocate of storytelling and marketing. So tell me about your approach to storytelling.
When I started telling my story in public spaces about how I lost my job, and and how I started from scratch, and how we almost lost our house and all of that, I got two different types of reactions. Okay. The first one was, oh my God, why would you talk about that and say, and then my response would be, why not? But more so, I would get a response or feedback saying, wow, thank you for sharing that. Okay, because then I know it's not me. And I think that more and more we're coming to a space where the human to human connection is more important than, the bottom line. And so establishing those connections of meaning, of purpose are more important, or at least are the groundwork for success in business long term. You can make a quick buck, by selling something of value, but to maintain loyalty, now it has to have a deeper meaning, and you have to connect here in your head. You have to connect here in your heart with people, and the gut, people have to trust you, and that happens in the gut. You know, people say, I don't know, this person, sounds shady. Those relationships are not rewarding and long lasting either. And so those four primary audiences that I met before, it's critical for businesses and also for marketing professionals to be experts in telling stories that appeal to employees, to employee empowerment, to the why, it's great working at this company, why we think, you're such a valuable asset to us as an employee, why do we do professional development, if you promote employees, how are you going to market that internally? So those are the types of stories that work inside an organization. And then externally, customers, why are we doing this? Why do we use, it's not these are quality products. No, why do we use quality products? Because we care. Okay. Why do we do business with vendors of diverse backgrounds? Because we care about the economic impact that it has in diverse communities. Why do we invest in community programs that impact marginalized communities? Because we believe in family values and that everybody deserves an equal shot, right? At success and at basic human needs. I mean, and so then it's all about caring. Storytelling is directly linked with giving a shit. Am I allowed to say that here?
Yeah, you are. And you're so
with caring, and that's it. It's just, all storytelling is about caring to inspire and to impact the life of others. And you could be selling a product or service, but just, pack that in there because it brings meaning to the exchange and the experience.
Give us an example, if you can, off the top of your head, not to put any pressure on you, but give us an example of a client of yours that has told a story and had success with that. Can you think of one?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we work in, as I mentioned before, in hospital networks. And since that that beautiful moment that Becky Neiman sat next to me, I've been involved in hospitals, which is the best kind of work you can do because you're impacting patient care. And there's nothing that brings me more joy than know that the work that we do with marketing and training, right, and diversity and inclusion impacts and lessens the levels of disparity in the care of diverse communities, mainly Black and Brown communities, okay? And so one of the things that we've done, for example, that has impacted the community is creating programming and initiatives internally at this hospital network that represents 23,000 employees, 9 healthcare campuses across Central Florida. We've created different programs and marketing materials to educate the staff, clinical and non-clinical, so the caregiving staff, but also the administrative staff, on the differences with caregiving in different cultures. And not that they're better or worse, they're just completely different, right? So
Right.
in this Central Florida community, the primary audiences are obviously mainstream Americans. Hispanics are 30% of the population. Then after that, we have a lot of people that are of Vietnamese heritage,
Wow.
Brazilians, okay, and then obviously African American, but then also Black Caribbean, specifically from the Haitian community. So we've created like these cultural forums. One is called the Hispanic Patient. The other one's called the Haitian Patient. The other one is called, we have another one that we partnered with a local LGBTQ plus community, and it's called the LGBTQ community and transgender health. Okay, and we do videos. We do leave behinds. We have PowerPoint presentations. I actually do the cultural competency presentations to the clinical staff. I'm all grown up, Roger, and it's fantastic because you see the light bulb go off. you know, but it's creating all of these assets, all of these marketing assets or communication assets that really contribute to enhancing their knowledge of the other, so they can better care for them. And it's just fantastic. I love it. And so they've received awards. You know, my client has every year. I'm in charge of writing their award applications, and every year without fail we win something, and it's just great.
That is great. And what I'm loving about this is you're talking about all the different things that they could potentially, or you can potentially help them create, which, you know, is part of marketing. You know, we
Yeah.
talk about all the different ways that we can communicate with our stakeholders, our clients, our potential, you know, target audiences. And the other thing that comes to mind as you're mentioning all these groups, because you've mentioned quite a few, they all sort of have a preference of how they are communicated to. Have you found that, let's say, a certain community prefers video as opposed to another community that likes the printed word, or maybe podcasting, because I know you've had success with that too? Give us a sense of what your groups prefer, if they do prefer anything, or is it across the board?
Yes, that's a very good question. We find that when it's a learning experience, a communication experience, but that involves learning, having what we call an edutainment approach, it's key. So it has to be educational, but entertaining too. And so in this, the combination of the live session embedded with some video is very important. So we incorporate video into everything we do. And now with COVID, that's been like our go-to. I haven't made so many videos for so many clients, you know, well, not me. I have partners, and we could talk about collaboration in a little bit, but we do the script writing. And so just being a very good writer and developer of content is important, you know, of different ideas, and just learning how to piece together how video, print, copy, you know, leave behind a brochure, a mail drop off. That's another thing that we've been doing. How all of these things can complement each other and really support a campaign. It's not about one medium only anymore. It really requires, because there's so much people are, you know, bombarded with, that, yeah, that you have to create an experience.
You and I come from publishing print background, and in our day, right about the time the first recession happened, yeah, you kind of were, company was sort of focused on one way to message, one way to communicate. And you're right, this new digital world has created a need for many ways to create content. And so, you know, so refreshing to hear that you kind of, you know, you went with that, and you can create so many different types of content. When we had the discussion, you mentioned something about cause effect marketing. Was that right?
Yeah.
Can you
Cause-based marketing.
tell us
Yes.
about that? Cause-based marketing. What do you mean by that?
So when you're a business owner, you're trying to showcase your expertise. One of the best ways to put yourself out there, okay, is to engage with a cause, something that's dear to your heart, that makes sense because it aligns with your values.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Okay, and so it's cause-based marketing, and it's AKA volunteer work, you know, or in-kind work at the beginning. But I found that it's the best way to first feel good because you're doing something also to give back, but also to really showcase what you got.
I
And so yeah, so we've done a lot of that. And then it's very useful to then broaden the scope of work that you have with any paying client, because if they don't do cost-based marketing, which is to support community programs or do outreach to grassroots organizations, etc., then you can scale up, you know, your engagement with them, and, you know, sell them into that, and they're like, oh, never thought of that. And so then you can point them in the right direction. When we started our business, that's what we did. This is how we showcased what we could do. And it was by getting involved with the Puerto Rican Chamber of Central Florida, with the Hispanic Chamber. I was the president of the Hispanic American Professional Business Women Association for 2 years,
Wow.
did their whole rebranding. But that gave us exposure to, other circles that we may otherwise have not been able to tap into. And then it's like basically expanding your spheres of influence. That's basically what it is. And so it's a great way to practice your craft, to gain exposure, to test also progress, because you're doing it for free. So it's like, oh, this is a good idea. This might work, right? But you're not going to test it with a client. But a nonprofit organization that needs the exposure, that needs the support, you can go and knock on their door and say, hey, we could do some social media postings for you. And they're going to be like, how much? Because we're broke. And you're like, no, for free. And then you do it. But that's something that you could put on your portfolio that you've done. And then if you can measure it, you can test it, and then you can then talk about the social impact that you've had in the community. And it's and again, it's rewarding. It's great way to gain experience and referrals, because they're gonna say, this chick knows what she's talking about because she did this, and this for us. These were the results, and you better call her, if you need this done. And so that's a tip of advice there.
That's great advice, and that's a phenomenal way to build trust and goodwill.
Totally.
Your community, whether it's a business community or your neighborhood or whatever it is. Sami, in the outline that we discussed before this interview, you talked about something called a subject matter expert. Tell us what that is and how it benefits your business.
As you develop your craft, and as you develop what I like to call the buckets, the focus areas that you're going to claim as that you're excellent at, right? Those then with time, and as you again engage with community organizations and build that reputation, reputation's tied into this, right? You all of a sudden realize one day that you start getting called to be on a panel, to do really cool discussions like this one with you. I'm like, oh my God, let me find out that I'm a subject matter expert, right? And so, but not in a cocky way. It's just like, at some point in your journey, you need to pause for a minute and look at the arsenal of things that you can do, that you're very good at. But then you really need to figure out which one of those 3 or 4 things that you're killer at, you're a subject matter expert on, and use that as your hook when you're going to go and meet with people, because then that's another way of gaining exposure to your services and your offerings, okay? And maintaining yourself relevant in the marketing circuit, okay? And in the business circuit too. And so it's injecting yourself in different spheres, talking about your subject matter expertise, so that way you get invited to speak on that, and then opportunities will continue coming your way.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned something about podcasting. I know we're going to follow a certain thread, but
yeah.
Something that happened to you with podcasting, because you kind of use that expertise with podcasting, and then some good things happened in this crazy pandemic time. Tell us about that, because I really don't want to miss that story.
Yes, no, totally. Listen, this all stems from knowing how to collaborate with others. Sometimes we're so focused on, oh, this is mine. I'm the Hispanic marketing. I mean, how many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
I'm the Hispanic marketing expert. Oh, I'm the multicultural, or I'm the best at this, at that. And sometimes people don't want to collaborate with other firms or other agencies or other photographers or videographers or content or whatever it is you do, because of fear of losing the business or overlap or whatever you want, okay? But that's a mentality that's based on scarcity. not of abundance. And so I like to think that there's an opportunity for everybody and that there's more work that any of us can do alone. But if we collaborate, we not only support each other and can get a bigger piece of the pie, okay, but then we also create a situation where there's peer mentorship, okay, peer mentorship. And let me explain. One time I was sitting on a board of this arts organization, a really like mainstream arts organization here in Central Florida. They needed someone that represented diversity, and with me they checked 2 boxes, right? I'm Hispanic and I'm female. So that being said, I'm sitting there, and one of the marketing managers of this organization, after I left, gives me a call. A young millennial, completely non-Hispanic, Caucasian, which is fine. I'm just mentioning it because he's not like me at all. Like, we're from 2 different worlds. I could be his mother, right, in terms of generational too. So he calls me up and he's like, hey, can we meet? I was intrigued by, what you contributed to the meeting. I'm like, sure. Make a long story short, this young man and I met for coffee, which is breaking bread, right? Breaking bread before breaking business. It's very important because that's where you find out what makes people tick. When you meet with people to enjoy a meal or a cup of coffee, it's very primal. So their guards are down and you really get to know what makes the person tick and what they're all about. And we hit it off. Fast forward a year and a half, 2 years later, he calls me up. He's like, hey, Sami, I really want to work with you. And so since there aren't any paid projects, I wanted to ask you, what have you always wanted to do, but that you feel you don't have the technical expertise to do that I might be able to help you? And I knew he did a lot of tech stuff and video recording and stuff. And I told him, Chris, I would love to do a podcast. And he's like, then let's do it. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And he already knew that I collaborated with another videographer. I have a web agency that they're like family. We've been working together, so it's seamless. I also have a printer that I've been working with. So he wanted to be part of that, right? And so then I said, okay, Chris, let's do it. And we launched the podcast. We're down to 62 episodes now. So what happened? Yeah, a year and a half later, we have 62 episodes, but check out what happened. Because of this collaboration, I've learned a lot because I had no idea how to put on me, this old broad, technology, forget about it. But with Chris's help, I was able to learn a lot, and he's learned also how to develop proposals, how to do a script, how to conduct an interview, so it's peer-to-peer mentorship. Okay, we've learned from each other. And what happened? When the pandemic hit, we were in a panic. We're like, oh my God, what do we do? But we were able to very swiftly and quickly pivot to remote recording. Now we have a video cast too. It's not audio only. And out of the blue, we got a call from a collaborator that just this past fall, we did a small project with them, who called us and say, hey, Sami, can you and Chris share your magic sauce and produce a podcast for us? Because we can't do any more engagement and we want to engage with our members by using a podcast in Spanish. And I said, sure. He's like, great. And the person said, great. Can you send me a proposal? And I'm like, wait a second. We're going to get paid for this? I called Chris up and I'm like, dude, we got to put together. So we've been busy. We did an 8-week program through this collaboration. Again, I'm just collaborating, doing the passion work. This was a passion project that now has sustained us during this pandemic. We did an 8-week podcast, and it was such a success that we're starting up now in Hispanic Heritage Month again until the end of the year.
That is an amazing story.
I can't believe it. I was like, is this happening? It's great.
And it's dynamite because, it's just your good work, your collaborative work all paid off.
And we put in the work that eventually made us subject matter experts.
There you go.
So
Wow.
people knew who to call. They're like, okay, wait a second. These people got their shit together. This is who we're going to call because they're going to be able to pull this off quickly, swiftly, and they're going to be nimble enough. What I said before, nimble enough to adjust to the uncertainty of not knowing, what to do next,
This is really, I mean, I knew this was going to be a good interview, but how perfectly it fits into what's happening today. And that's such an incredible thing. I want to talk for a few minutes about the importance of articulating values, which you mentioned, roles and expectations with every project. And it seems to me like you're juggling a lot of different talents, a lot of different philosophies, maybe a lot of different suggestions. Tell us about that, and tell us about how you pull that team together.
Okay. I talk about this when we work with marketing with authenticity. And authenticity has a lot to do with just being real to who you are. Just don't fake it, okay? So if you're a jerk, you're a jerk, But if you're cool, you're cool, and that's okay. Authenticity has value. When you meet with people, whether it's a prospective client, whether it's a partner, a collaborator, okay, or it's even someone that you're going to hire, someone on your team, it paves the way for a less stressful and a more productive working experience if values are aligned. And so getting that out there from the get-go is very, very important. So there's a spectrum, right, in terms of value. You could be very Gandhi-like, which is like a saint, right? If you're Gandhi-like, it's like no one's there, quite there, okay? Or you could be very Gotti-like, right? Like the mob, right? So it's Gandhi-like or Gotti-like, I say. Most people are somewhere in the middle, right? Exactly. Hopefully closer to Gandhi-like. And I want to say that we're closer to this side, right, than to Gotti-like, because we don't like shady people. Right. And so that's why breaking bread is so important, because if you know to ask the right questions, you can figure people out and be able to set the tone for how that working relationship is going to be. I don't need MOUs, which is memorandums of understanding, with most of the people that I work with, or contracts or agreements, because they know from the get-go that my word stands true. Sometimes you need to have those things in place, but everybody we collaborate with, tend to have the same set of values of integrity, of honesty, of transparency, of, speaking up. It might hurt, but at least we're very open, roles. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows, okay, so Sami's very particular about sending stuff back to the clients, that are not like up here. I always say, shoot for extraordinary. Most people are okay with here, satisfactory. No, let's shoot for extraordinary every single time. I don't care who the hell it is, okay? I don't care if it's free work, always extraordinary. And so I have to eyeball everything that goes out. So I have people working on stuff, but they already know, don't send anything out. That's the expectation, right? And those are the roles. And so it's very important to set values, roles, and expectations clearly from the get-go in any kind of relationship, whether it's personal, if you're dating somebody, if with your children, but also in business exchanges, because that way there's no confusion. There's no confusion, there's no misunderstanding, and that really lends to long-lasting relationships.
That is such a great piece of advice. Again, another area that we don't really get to talk about in class too much. Before we get to the end, and I am going to ask you, towards the end, a little bit of what's going on in the world today, and your spin on that. But before we get there, I've been hearing a lot of things you're saying, which, I feel in my heart. And I think I get the feeling that you're like me. You find inspiration, you find information, you find advice in books, maybe in seminars, maybe workshops. Who are your inspirations out there? What books do you recommend? What, thought leaders? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a very good question. I read a lot, but I'm really inspired by, again, poignant stories. You can find in stories of people that have gone through very challenging experiences, a lot of wealth of knowledge and direction there and inspiration. But I have to tell you that I do a lot of searching on LinkedIn. I've made a lot of friends through LinkedIn and in the business community. But I feel like 9 out of 10 times, the people that I consider either peer mentors or just plain mentors, because they're more experienced and seasoned than I am, tend to be within a 6 degree of separation. It's people who I know, who know somebody, who knows somebody, who knows somebody. So that's the easiest way to expand your knowledge, is learning from people who know people who know people, but within your sphere, because 9 out of 10 times the people that you dig and that you're aligned with in terms of values, okay, and that you're like-minded, will connect you with other people that are like-minded too. And I got to tell you, one of them, I have a dear friend who's a client too, but like we're like sisters now after so many years. Wendy Bost. This woman knows how to connect the dots like nobody's business. You need to, it's almost like creating. So she introduces me to people every single week. She's like, oh my God, you need to meet so and so. I just met this person. Like they know you because you're authentic. They know these two people need to meet because something's going to happen, and so it's almost like, I heard this someone, I can't remember who said it, it's almost like developing your own board of directors, your own personal board of directors.
I mean, that makes so much sense
Yeah.
based on what you've said up to now, about building your connections, building friendships, building relationships, which is at the core of most marketing, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
customer
Trust.
service and build relationships, and that's in sales as well as marketing.
Yep.
Sami, I have to ask you, because it is the elephant or the elephants in the room. There's so much happening in the world. We've just got in New York. We're at stage 4 of this pandemic. Every day you hear on Facebook or LinkedIn businesses that are folding. There's a presidential election going on. Which has really two very different sides, kind of going for the presidency. You have Black Lives Matter, and of course you have the economy. What piece of advice would you, since you've been so successful navigating through the rocks, if you will, would you give our students, when they see all this and they think, how am I ever going to get a job? How am I ever going to start my fashion business or my design, or how am I ever going to get into the business world? What advice would you give to those young people?
Read, study, analyze, and reach out to people. That's what you need to do. Talk, listen, ask questions. But really, if you're into fashion, get into as many Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, do searches and reach out to people. Be open and honest and say, hey, I need a mentor in the fashion. You'd be surprised. I've heard so many stories of people that were ballsy and just like sent a letter, an email, and bam, they wound up with the mentor of their dreams, like really famous people too. So reach out to people. Now, this is one of my pet peeves. Unfortunately, especially in communities of color, I found this a lot in the Latino community, where people reach a certain level and they're on panels, and I've gone to forums like at the UN and stuff like that, and they seem really cool and authentic when they're speaking. I'm like, oh my God, this person is so approachable. And then when you approach them, you feel that barrier, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But you know what I'm saying? But it's like, it's a pet peeve of mine. I just want to say, if you need to reach out, reach out. I will always get back to people. It's like one of my pet peeves, because I feel like we need to empower each other. Now, this is the other thing that I want to say. I feel that a lot of what's going on, it's interrelated and is based on fear. Fear of stepping into the unknown. fear about, you know, what the other might do to me, you know, fear of oppression. Okay. And I feel that we're in a very promising place where we can affect change by infiltrating every nook and cranny of the corporate sector, of the nonprofit sector, of the community world, you know, the public sector, and do good. And when you reach that place of success, don't turn the other way. Reach back, okay? And pull somebody up behind you. And the other thing too is, don't bring to reality the fear that perhaps white America has, really, of a more diverse workforce and marketplace, right, and community, and is that the oppressed will become the oppressor. You see, so we need to be careful that we break that cycle of oppression, okay, and do what's right. And like they say in our culture, mi casa es tu casa. I mean, it can't be more inclusive than that, right? Inclusivity is the name of the game, and we really need to practice it in everything we do. And regarding small businesses, or that you feel like where to go, don't say no to anything. Say yes. Let yes be your first, and then you figure it out. Find the resources, collaborate, find one of your classmates that you're like, oh, he's good with video, you know, and I've had a couple of conversations, or she's an amazing copywriter. Maybe we could do something together, you know. I'll give you an example. My sister-in-law just lost her job about a month and a half ago, and she was freaking out. And I'm like, dude, you've been wanting to start your own business like forever. And I said, you're a subject matter expert, whether you realize it or not, right? Because you've been working in your industry, civil engineering, for 17 years. And I said, get your act together, do a bullet point of, right, your buckets, what I said before. Find out, what are you good at that no one, that you know you'll bet anything that you could beat anybody at that, right? And they'll claim them as your areas of subject matter expertise, and then let's build a brand around that. So we did her logo. She secured the domain, a very unique domain. She just ordered business cards, and she already has 2 clients. You know, amazing. In 6 weeks, you know. And so of course, she's my sister-in-law, so we did all that for free. But what I'm saying is, you know, it doesn't take much. Just think about it, pause, figure out what your strengths are, and go for it, and become a master of your craft. You have to, in marketing, it's about being a master of your craft. That's it, and building trust.
You know, Sami, I got to tell you that this is, without a doubt, as challenging as a time as it is, also one of the greatest opportunities for entrepreneurial entrepreneurial creation, to see these entrepreneurs be able to create, you know, their work, their business. I mean, in no time in history has it been, I don't want to say easier, but easier to create a website, to, you know, connect with people, to send a message that reaches many, many people. You see it with influencers, and you see it with folks like that. I think that it's time that you wrote a book. So while you hold off on that thought and navigate through that idea, I think you have such wonderful experiences and stories that, yeah, I think there's a book ready there. And when you do have it, I'm going to make my students read it, and I'm going to definitely buy it.
Oh, thank you, Roger.
No, thank you for giving us such an inside look at how you navigated through, you know, 2 recessions, you know, your own ambitions, your own desires to network and grow your business, and the things you learned along the way. Thank you so much, Sami, for that. My students are very lucky today to have heard from you. So,
and thank you for having me. And thank you for having me. I'm tickled pink. I'm so happy right now.
Well, I'm happy too, Sami. And with that, folks, watch the video and make sure you take a lot of notes. There's good stuff here.